that we love them very much. We mourn with them, we need them, we respect them, and we're proud of them, and we thank them. Would you tell me that, Commissioner Bratton and Chief O'Neill?
That, of course, Cardinal Timothy Dolan. He addressed congregants at Sunday Mass at St. Patrick's. Now, Mayor De Blasio, he attended the Mass, as did members of the city's top brass. The mayor, he is facing tough criticism from police across the city. Officers, as you can see in this video, turning their backs on the mayor as he entered the hospital following the shootings. PBA President Pat Lynch, he went even further, saying the mayor and other officials to blame here for the deaths of Officer Ramos and Officer Liu.
There's blood on many hands tonight. Those that incited violence on the street under the guise of protest, that blood on the hands starts on the steps of City Hall in the office of the mayor.
Today, Mayor De Blasio and the Police Commissioner Bill Bratton held a joint press conference where they said New Yorkers should extend thanks and gratitude to officers on the street.
I have, throughout my public life, expressed tremendous respect for the NYPD. It's very well documented. I will continue to. I also think in a democracy that people express their desire for a more fair society, and that's right and proper as well, but they must do it peacefully. Can be no violence, and certainly can be no violence against those who protect us and who represent our society. The police are our protectors, and they must be respected as such.
Okay, with that as a backdrop, and that was this afternoon, as Dominic said, there will be both a wake this Friday and then the funeral on Saturday for the officers who were killed this past Saturday. The words of Pat Lynch, and I'll start with you, Jay, and we'll go around the table. Did they cross a line? His job is to advocate for police here. We've certainly seen him being very vocal. Dominic sat down with him for more than one interview, specifically talking about the Eric Garner case before the indictments, well, it didn't come down. But to say blood is on the hands of the mayor, did he go too far?
No. I think Pat Lynch was accomplishing two things at that point in time. One, he was repeating the views of a significant number of police officers. Secondly, by stating it publicly as he did, then the individual police officers don't have to say it, and it protects them, and that's one of his responsibilities as the union leader. If you looked at the police commissioner chooses his words very, very carefully. There's no misinterpretation in the police commissioner's choice of words. The mayor has to learn to choose his words more carefully.
There is, listen, Rudy Giuliani and Mayor De Blasio, I don't think anyone will ever confuse the two, but even Mayor Giuliani said that while he took issue with the handling of the protests and allowing the protesters to go to the Brooklyn Bridge, let's say, or the tunnels, he did say that Pat Lynch went too far. You've been an official in charge of a community. Did those words go too far, specifically blood on the hands?
I think they did, and I think they're an emotional reaction to a mayor that's handled this very poorly. And I think the criticisms, I think, are legitimate. Remember, we've talked about this on your show before. He brought racism into this issue when I didn't think it needed to be from the very beginning. He has not been supportive of the police department, which he has to be as mayor many times. But you've got to go back and look at the incident here. You've got a madman, a deranged man, who, for reasons that we can discuss, decided to pick up this, let's kill the cops. How you can blame the mayor on that, I don't know. And I think it's very important, one other piece of this, and with all due respect to the union president, there are negotiations which are not settled over pay. And so you've got a lingering, very contested relationship between the mayor's office and the union.
And also, if I can interrupt, a pension deal that was struck by the prior governor that hasn't sat well with rank and file as well. But yeah.
So we began this with a mayor who ran on the issue of trying to control or curtail police work immediately, and all these issues on negotiations.
You know, Dominic, there's always tension between the police union and mayors. They didn't love Rudy when they cut the pay. They had issues with Bloomberg.
The police unions don't love any mayor.
Right.
Let's
But
call
I've
it for
never
what it
heard
is.
it like this.
It's never been this bad.
I mean, even you go back, take me back. I mean, people, and I know Jay will speak to this in a little bit, you got to go back to the 70s. I think where it's this ugly and this contentious, and people are talking about some of the consequences that may or may not fall out of this, but at this moment where we are right now, you got to go back more than 30, 40 years to having it this tense. Those words, though, have you ever heard anything like it?
No, but as the county executive said, I can understand them from Mr. Lynch. He is a very emotional person. This is very emotional for him and the entire city right now, and folks are very, very upset. Now, here's why I can understand it. It took me a while. I do not agree, County Executive, that the mayor brought race into this. I think the actions that, now let's put aside the police officers, if we could for 1 second. I know it's very tough because we're all very upset at what happened to those police officers that were outside that housing project to protect residents and were gunned down when they did nothing wrong to anyone, and some deranged man from Baltimore wanted to make himself a martyr and carried out this crazy act. But the mayor was responding to what happened. And Pat Lynch, here's why I can understand. When we sat down with him recently, and Pat Lynch, at first I didn't understand the logic when he kept saying, the mayor threw us under the bus. And when I asked him about it, and he said, Dominic, the mayor put all of racism of the world on our shoulders, police officers. And that is unfair, Richard. Police officers are not the blame of all racism against minorities, but yet that's the way they feel based on what Mr. Lynch told us. So I can understand why he's very, very upset with City Hall. And when you add the fact that they don't have a contract, it's a recipe for a disaster.
Jeannie?
Yes, Richard.
Same question. And I got to say, it wasn't just Pat Lynch. It was, I mentioned before, Rudy Giuliani certainly had criticisms as someone who has held the same job. But he did make the distinguishing that you can't go that far. It also was noted he shot his own girlfriend in Brooklyn here, so the same lunatic that went there. I mean, you can't ascribe, let's not give this guy any more due or thought process than he certainly doesn't merit. However, George Pataki went as far as to say that Eric Holder and the mayor, the U.S. Attorney General and this mayor here, bear responsibility for what happened on Saturday. Just from my end, I'm used to dealing with recklessness of language sometimes of elected officials of both parties, and it never helps the process. And sometimes I expect it from certain sources. Didn't expect it from him. And I've heard other people say and condemn some of the language, but what's going on here? Blood on the hands. You can't get stronger than that.
Well, I have said publicly in the last 48 hours that I think it's an overstatement to say blood on the hands. But that said, what George Pataki, what Senator Lindsey Graham said, there is truth to that. If you want to talk about people who have been loose and incorrect with their rhetoric, you need to also look at the mayor. He ran a race in which he says he wasn't attacking the police, but if you were listening to it just casually as a voter might be, or as a New York City police officer might be, are you really going to be able to separate police tactics from an attack on the police? He did that for political reasons, to shore up his base. That makes sense. But we all knew, and we've talked about this repeatedly, once you get into office, you have to govern the city. And you can't run a revolution from the mayor's office.
You can't. And you can't, but my only point is, I've agreed, and I've said, and we've debated it before, I've taken issue that the mayor has at times confused the position of being controller and mayor. Once you're mayor, whether you like it or not, you're the mayor of everybody. But that said, I think we're all conveniently forgetting that what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, I remember I was sitting in another event, I had to come back. Nobody knew what was going to happen when the Eric Garner decision came down in Staten Island. Nobody knew. Everybody agreed that the mayor had to try and put a lid on the emotions that were bubbling over. Now that said, I've heard a lot of law enforcement officials, friends in the job that I have, who took great issue with what the mayor had to say. However, especially his reference of his son Dante and his concerns over him coming home safety and law enforcement, That all said, Jay, who is Pat Lynch, who's a city employee? He's not making there a safer environment in the city right now. More than that, they're telling people that they don't want the mayor to attend funerals. Then we're putting out memos here as to who's going to change policy when it's not coming from the commissioner in terms of how many patrols are going out. We intentionally have our military and our police to have civilian control at the end of the day. We don't let people make up their own rules and to decide here what is or isn't acceptable. I mean, if you want to talk, if their anger is the responsibility of the language of the mayor, what about the responsibility as it relates to the police? And he doesn't speak for everyone in law enforcement. I mean, I find it really problematic that these two families who are about to go through the worst week of their lives, you now have somebody in effect saying, implying who shouldn't be able to attend the funerals.
Let's take a look at that, and let's take a look at what you said about Ferguson, because I think it's a great comparison. You had the stepfather of Michael Brown get up after the grand jury declined to indict.
Burn this bleep down.
And nobody in law enforcement came out with strong criticism for it because he said it out of emotion.
Oh, no.
Versus
There's still open questions about whether or not it should be prosecuted.
Yeah,
I disagree that nobody condemned that language.
I'm talking about at the police officer level. The police officers did not come out on that. In New York, the mayor should not be getting emotional about the declination to indict. The mayor has to govern a city, as the professor said. The mayor shouldn't be taking sides, and the mayor did take sides, and that's where the problem comes about.
And Richard, just pragmatically and politically, if your number one goal, as the mayor himself has said, is peace and safety, he's got to have the back of the NYPD, and they have to know it. Otherwise, his ability to get any of his initiatives done is severely going to be cramped, and I think that's where he is now. He's got to repair this rift, and this rift has been coming a long time, and to let it, go this far, he's responsible for that. Look at what his press secretary came out and said.
We're going to hit to a break here. When we come back, we're going to keep this conversation going. We're going to invite you at home into the conversation as well. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and answer today's question. What do you think about the words that you heard there from Pat Lynch, the PBA president? Did they speak to the matter, or did they go too far? We'll be back with more table conversation straight ahead.